Hello, Sat Stackers, and welcome to a special episode of the Bitcoin Bulletin Podcast. Today, we will be doing our first ever interview, and we will be speaking with Gabe, the proprietor of GoodBeans Coffee Shop in San Salvador, El Salvador. He's been making quite a name for himself, shipping El Salvador's famous coffee all over the world. But you might know him best from Twitter, or X, as the guy who pops up anytime anyone says, "Well, you can't use Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee," and replies, "Oh, yes, you can." This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be construed as financial advice. All views expressed on this podcast are solely the opinions of the host and or any guests that we might have from time to time. Nothing on this podcast should be construed as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or to follow a particular investing strategy. So I have Gabe with GoodBeans El Salvador with me today. And if you aren't familiar with GoodBeans, you need to follow them on Twitter. They're at GoodBeans on Twitter. And they sell El Salvador. You say, so I've always said Salvadoran my whole life. But then I was listening to Simply Bitcoin, and Nico and Opti keep calling people from El Salvador Salvadorians. Is that correct also, or is that a...
I've said Salvadoran my whole life as well, so I think that's that's the correct one. But like I've heard a lot, some people even say El Salvadoran, which I think that's maybe a little bit longer. But I've said Salvadoran as well my whole life, so cool with that one.
All right, Salvadoran. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't offending anybody. Our podcast has well, 55% of our listeners are in the United States, which makes sense. I'm in the United States, but about 40% are Central and South America. We have a lot of listeners in Venezuela, Colombia. So that's really cool. So I didn't want to do any faux pas. I just lost. Did I just get orange looking to you? My lights just kind of flickered.
A little bit.
Yeah, I wonder what's up with that. I've just been having fits with this lighting. I'm just going to roll with it, I guess. All right. So I wanted to ask you about your business. And first of all, how long ago did you open the GoodBeans?
So the GoodBeans been open for about close to 2 years now. Close to 2 years. We started on, I don't know if you remember that little kiosk in Cuscatlán, which is like a suburb of San Salvador. But we've been in our current location now for about 4 months, 4.5 months now. Like we're in the city proper now. But
right,
the whole business is about 2 years old.
I saw that, a couple months ago, you were posted a whole bunch of pictures of a new shop. I wasn't sure what the story with that was. If you were just moving into a bigger location, a better location. You were in a suburb of San Salvador.
Yeah, both. Right now, we're actually like in the middle of the city, like in a neighborhood called San Benito, which is it's basically like the most lively neighborhood in San Salvador. You have a lot of the nightlife, a lot of the good restaurants, a lot of the great coffee shops. They're all located in this neighborhood. So whereas before we used to be in like a little strip mall outside of the city and then the suburbs. So it's definitely been a big change. It used to be a little kiosk. Now it's like it's a small store, but it's an actual like store. So people can come here, and not only enjoy like a cup of coffee, but we can, people come for meetings, people come for lunch, people come for different things. Whereas before it was basically just takeaway because again, it was a little kiosk.
That's awesome. So what made you decide to open a coffee shop?
My first job ever was actually as a barista. So ever since then, that was in 2009. So ever since then, I kind of like wanted it. Wanted to have like a coffee shop. There's this Canadian guy here his name is Ben. He owns a coffee shop called literally it's Ben's Coffee, but it's one of the pretty good ones here in the city. And ever since I was like, 16, 17, I'm 32 now, just to give you an idea. But when I was like 16, 17, I used to go to this coffee shop because I always liked the idea of coffee. I always enjoyed it. And I always knew like El Salvador had pretty good coffee. My first job just happened to be in coffee. That actually was in Switzerland.
Wow.
In 2009. And ever since then, and that's kind of like what it all kind of started, because in Switzerland you could not get good coffee, you just couldn't. uh at least back then. I don't know, maybe things have changed. They pretty much, I'm sure they have, but at least back then everything you could get was just like very commercial, very dark roast and very bitter coffee. So my mom used to like send me care packages, and they consisted of like this Ben's coffee that she shipped through El Salvador mail to me in Switzerland. And funny because here we are like a decade and a half later, and that's basically what I do. I stick El Salvador coffee in the mail. And I figured, because it worked back then. Like my mom, it was just like a care package situation, but she grabbed a bag of coffee, put it in a box, ship it over to me. And I guess now it's a business that I'm
That's
doing.
awesome. Well, congratulations. Your coffee is fantastic. I've ordered from you a couple times. As I mentioned earlier, I was on the road for several months. So the last time I ordered was like May. Uh, so I was going to grind up. I have just a tiny bit of the Torgos. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, Torgos. Torgos is I guess the label has changed a little bit, but that's it. It's the national bird of El Salvador. And it's a bird that I guess its main characteristic, like a lot of birds, it cannot live, in captivity. Like Torgos needs to be free or it dies. Like if you cage a Torgos, he'll just refuse to eat and he'll die. So I guess that's it's one of those freedom values that characterize the bird, and that's why it's the national bird here. It's a small bird. It's about yay big. So it's not like a big bald eagle or anything, but that's what gives the name to our coffee, and it's very colorful, and it lives in, you can see it here in the city sometimes, but it pretty much lives in a lot of these coffee areas. It actually burrows holes. It doesn't nest, like it doesn't build a nest. It like burrows holes into things, and makes its own little home that way.
Like in the ground or in a tree
In the ground, yeah, or like
okay.
the sides of cliffs, that sort of thing. It's actually here. There's Mayan pyramids, and a lot of them, like they had to put like these coverings on them in order to keep the Torah gods from like digging into them. Because yeah, they don't do it on trees. They kind of like do it on the ground. They like the side of mountains, the side of cliffs, or in this case, the side of a Mayan pyramid to go in there and nest.
I was going to ask you about the Mayan culture in El Salvador because normally when I hear about the Mayan culture, of course, you hear about Tulum and
Mexico.
yeah, a lot of the stuff in the in Quintana Roo and Costa Maya and Guatemala. Uh, but I mean, obviously, I mean, you border Guatemala, right, to the
Yeah.
south. So if they're in Mexico, if the pyramids were in Mexico and Guatemala, I'm assuming that there would be pyramids there as well. I mean, this is a major tangent. Obviously, it doesn't have anything to do with coffee or Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But when I toured some of the archaeological sites last year, I saw some of the pyramids, and those were thousands of years old. And then like Tulum is only like a couple hundred years old, and there weren't any pyramids. It was really more modern. It almost looked like a Roman city with like columns, and
Hmm.
there were like some pyramid. There was like a pyramid shaped temple right up along the coast where they had their religious festivals, but they there weren't any pyramids. So are most of the ruins, the archaeological sites in El Salvador, are they the pyramid type ruins, or do you?
So they look a little bit differently, but you have two main kinds. So in El Salvador, you had two like Mayan cultures, depending on which side of the country you're on. So there's like a big river called the Lempa River, which divides El Salvador in half. And the eastern side, well, the western side of that, so El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, that's all like you have the Maya people culture. So you have those kind of ruins. You do have the pyramids. And on the opposite side of El Salvador, so the eastern side, so from the Lempa south, if you will, going on the direction of Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. You have the Lenca culture. So, basically you have two different kinds of Maya culture in El Salvador. But you do have the pyramids, and you do have, you also have, because we have a lot of volcanoes, and I guess this kind of ties into Bitcoin and everything. We have a lot of volcanoes. So you have one of the main archaeological sites here, which is Joya de Sereng. And I'll send you a photo of it. But it basically was like a normal, everyday Mayan village which kind of like with Pompeii, it was covered in like a volcanic ash and everything during one of the explosions. So it's totally preserved. That's one of the ones that Toro was actually like to dig into. So you have everything, you know, you do have the big pyramids. They're not like pointy like the Egyptian ones, they're very like stepped. But I'll send you photos of that, and you do have other kinds of sites, like for example, like that one, like Joya de Sereng, which is just like a Mayan village, which happened to be preserved. So it's kind of like Pompeii in that sense. They do call it the Pompeii of the Americas. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and that's basically why it got like preserved. But you have, you know, different kinds.
All right. Well, that leads me into something else I was going to ask you about.
Mhm.
I noticed your website, you've expanded your product offering. When I first started buying it was just you had a couple varieties of coffee, all whole bean. And then
Mhm.
I saw you added pour over packs, but then I also saw you have your Kawadi hot chocolate, and you have an event coming up in October, cacao workshop. And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, well, that's a traditional Mayan thing. So I didn't, I don't know a whole lot about El Salvador. I know a little bit about El Salvador. I'm a little bit older than you are. In like 1978, my next door neighbor had an exchange student from El Salvador, and she was awesome. And then that's right about the time things went really bad. Um, I guess the revolution or civil war in your country, and so
Yeah, pretty much from
she had to
80
go
to 92.
home. She had to go home early, but for a while she was teaching me Spanish and teaching me a lot about El Salvador, and then just kind of El Salvador became like a black hole. You know, nobody went to El Salvador. Nobody, if you thought about El Salvador, all you thought about was just crime.
Yeah.
And then in like the 90s, MS-13, the gang members in Los Angeles became a big thing, and everybody was calling them, you know, an El Salvadoran gang. I'm like, these are LA gang members. You know, they're speaking English, and but that's all Americans knew about for the most part was just the violence, and apparently that's radically changed in the last couple of years. So it's really cool to see that that nonsense is over with. I've never heard from her again. I hope her and her family is fine, but that was decades ago. Um, so you opened your business about 2 years ago, and does that I get the current president Nayib Bukele has been in office for 4 years. He's up for re-election this next year, so 3 years.
So here the terms are 5 years. So
Okay,
he's coming up for re-election on
the 24,
February.
2024.
February is
Yeah.
the elections.
So he's been 4 years now, and he gets a lot of credit over here for the turnaround in your country. Obviously, I mean he's the president. He's, you know, like we have our president, and he makes speeches and he can sign legislation and he can propose legislation, but he's not the one cleaning up neighborhoods and building businesses. But it really does seem from an outsider like when he got elected, that was a huge turning point. Maybe it's just because I started hearing about El Salvador again. Um, when did El Salvador start to shake its reputation as just a really violent um, place that Americans wouldn't want to travel to? Because now I want to go, and all my friends want to go, and I wanted to go because I wanted to try the coffee because I'm a big coffee fan, and hearing about El Zonte and the surfing. I don't really surf. I've surfed. I've been on a surfboard a few times, but I wouldn't say I qualified as surfing. But I wanted to see that. I wanted to see the Turgos because I'm really into birding. Um, but now I'm really interested in seeing some of those Mayan sites as well. So I'm going to have to spend quite a bit of time there when I go there. But when did is this big turnaround just a Hollywood thing, or has there really been a dramatic shift in just the whole feeling and the nature of living in El Salvador?
All right, so I guess to start at the beginning, since we discussed quite a few of these things. Um, all right, so like you mentioned, essentially we had, you know, your friend was there in the late 70s. That was still Salvador was still pretty safe back then. Essentially we did have that's our civil war was from 1980 to 1992. I was actually born in 91 January, so you know I was born on the tail end of it. I
Good
didn't get,
timing.
yeah, I didn't get to live it, but
That's
I mean a
important.
little bit, you know, obviously, but peace accords were signed in 92. And part of the whole deal was before it used to be like a military police and it got turned into a civil police, a civilian police. And during that time, so the whole state security forces, if you will, were disarmed, and they started with this new civilian police. Right around that time, basically, Bill Clinton started deporting a lot of these gang members from LA.
Yeah.
So it's people who were so basically the story is some of them were Salvadorans, and what happened was they left El Salvador during the Civil War, and then they went to LA, and here they joined with like Mexican gangs and everything. But at the end of the day, they were pretty much controlled over there, at least at that point, by the police and the FBI and all the state forces, right? They kept them under check. But when they were deported here, they found a place that literally had like pretty much no police. Um, and they was just coming out of the Civil War. So they start coming in here in the, mid to late 90s. And up until like the early 2000s, it was an issue, but it was not like a super heavy crime society even then. But say from 2005 to 2016, 17-ish, that's when it really got out of hand. And all these kids that were deported from LA, they really had no background in El Salvador. A lot of them didn't even have family here anymore. A lot of them didn't even speak much Spanish here. But they came from like small time little gang members in LA to a society that was, it was definitely not ready for that. And they found that even though they were under police control over there, they came here to a place where they could literally get away with anything. And it just started growing as a problem. It became worse and worse and worse and worse. And like small business owners were extorted. A lot of most of the violence you hear about, a lot of them did touch obviously the civilian population in El Salvador. But a lot of the murders and everything was gang on gang. So if you, as a tourist, you were to come here, like 10 years ago, you probably would not have had any issues. But people are just not coming because of they heard, oh, El Salvador is like the most dangerous country in the world, which statistically it was at one point. It was a lot of like gang on gang violence. Like the civilian population who lived in conflict areas were the worst hit with this. There was extortion of small businesses, so a lot of like kind of like a lot of what you saw, like Chicago in the 30s, gang, that gang activity, there was extortion, there was all this big problems. Starting with like probably, and this comes with the current administration, a lot of that really went down. Um, it had started like slowly. I think the worst of it was around 2015, 16-ish. Through different means, it started going down a bit. But really it wasn't until like, 2 to 3 years ago where you would saw like a very significant drop on all the crime statistics. Up until now that I mean, you know, it's like we went from having days with 15, 20 murders to most days there are really none anymore. So for a lot of people, it's been like a night and day situation. Like if you were an everyday common Salvadoran who lived or had a small business in a very gang conflictive area, oh, it was like a night and day thing for you. Like a lot of these people had to pay extortion for decades, probably. It started like not much. Eventually, it got like ridiculously bad. So people could not invest. Like a lot of the companies, like to give you an idea, like the cable company, they were areas in El Salvador where the cable or ISP providers, they had customers that they just couldn't charge, because they just couldn't disconnect their services from. Like like it got to that point where there were areas where like you ordered a pizza and the Pizza Hut guy would tell you, okay, we're not delivering it to your home. We can take it within a few blocks or whatever to this. You can pick it up at the gas station in the corner, to give you an idea, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that has normalized now. So as always, as in any country, really, the worst part of the situation happened to like the people who were the most vulnerable, who were the poorest, who lived in the worst neighborhoods, like anywhere else. Obviously in El Salvador, like if you were if you were wealthy, you could live a very safe life during this whole time. But at what cost? You lived in a gated community. You had, private security covering the community. You did have razor wire around the house. There were areas where you simply would not go to. And I think that's how it mostly would have affected, like, say you were visiting here as a tourist. But most people would not even risk it. Like if you were you would did not visit El Salvador. Like the tourism here has grown from like a few brave surfers here and there that used to come, because the beaches for the most part they were fine. But the country had such a negative reputation that people would just not visit it. I would still argue that for the most part, tourists would probably have been safe even back then, but people just wouldn't risk it. It's like if someone were to tell you, oh, for like visit Colombia in the late '80s, most tourists are fine. Probably most tourists were fine, but you just would not be risking it, right? You were like, people
Yeah,
were afraid to visit El Salvador.
there's certainly cities in the United States where there's large swaths where you just don't go. I mean, again, I'm just hearing what I hear online on Twitter X or Reddit, or from people like you. But I'd feel safer going to visit you in El Salvador than I would feel in most of Los Angeles.
Yeah,
So,
crazily enough, like I have a friend who just visited. She's a friend from high school, and she lives, in California. She lives in, I think it's called Brea, but it's around LA.
yeah,
And she's telling me, like we were joking that it's kind of crazy that I would feel, I park on the street here, and I know my car is gonna be fine. Like probably my worst concern is that someone will like uh not even break into the car. It's not even like a concern. My worst concern would be like, it's gonna sound stupid, but here that's always happened and still happens. But like the logo for your car, like the emblem, people
oh
just
yeah,
steal them because it takes 5 seconds to do and you can get $20 out of it. That's probably my worst concern, but I would it would not be a concern to me. Like I see these videos of like people, in San Francisco, they tourists leave their car, with their belongings, and like it's like insane. It's like it seems every tourist car gets broken into in San Francisco, so
yeah.
it's kind of crazy in that way. So we were joking that at least in a lot of these situations, she feels like safer here when she's visiting, and she grew up here. We all lived through the worst of the violence here in different extents. At coming, and this is coming from like a person that um had a pretty privileged position in this sense because I was never personally extorted or anything. So, um, like the only time I've been mugged in my life was not in El Salvador; it's actually in New York City, to give you an idea. Um, but you could not escape from it. Like you still were there were areas where like you just would not go to. You kept, you were driving, you were at a traffic light or whatever, a stoplight, and you were constantly looking out. You had your windows rolled up, you had your locks on your car put on. Again, did anything particularly bad happen to me? No, but it was kind of like this paranoid state that okay, something might. Um, like I walk around town a lot more than I used to. Um, I walk around town using my phone, which is something that I mean, 5 years ago, I probably would not have done. Like
Yeah.
walking around downtown San Salvador, like on your phone. 5 years ago, even I would have told you don't. I would have told you don't even go downtown. Don't walk around with your phone and with that kind of thing out. And now I even do it, and it's kind of crazy in that sense because it's very much like the small things, but for me, it's like the small things, but for a lot of people here in El Salvador, it's literally been like a night and day change where they were like,
Well,
they were like prisoners of their own home and they're not anymore. I feel
that's
a little
certainly
bit.
uplifting. I mean, you never want to see anybody living in fear or poverty or crime anywhere,
Yeah.
let alone, we have a special place in our heart for El Salvador as Bitcoiners because, because when you adopted Bitcoin 2 years ago as a legal tender. And speaking about Bitcoin, I guess I've used up half our time here and talk mostly about the Mayans and crime and no coffee or Bitcoin. So real quick, I want to ask you about Bitcoin. It seems like the adoption of Bitcoin, it coincides with the reduction in crime. That maybe Bitcoiners like to think it had something to do with it, but it's maybe it's just timing. How much of an impact has making Bitcoin legal tender had on El Salvador or the lives of an average Salvadoran in general?
I would argue that maybe for like the average Salvadoran hasn't been like a huge impact. To be very honest with you. It's look, a lot of people think, speaking about Bitcoin in El Salvador, is it legal tender? Yes. But there has been obviously challenges coming with that. And I don't think like the adoption has been as great as a lot of people expected it to be, or as fast as a lot of people expected it to be. Having said that, we're like 2 years on. El Salvador's Bitcoin adoption is greater than anywhere else on the planet. I mean, by a long shot, obviously. And I can pay a lot of things with Bitcoin. Can I pay absolutely anything I want in Bitcoin in El Salvador? No. Which is maybe some of the misconception that a lot of people have. I think it's been like great for a bunch of things. Tourism being one of them. Like you do get all these conferences, you do get all the investment into the country. A lot of people, like I know people that have come to El Salvador to live because of Bitcoin. Like there's like this Canadian family who just moved in really close to us, and they came to El Salvador to live because of Bitcoin and Justin Trudeau. So there's like a big push and pull factor. But yeah, I think like the adoption here is greater than anywhere else by a long shot, and you can use it certainly a lot more in El Salvador by a long shot. But I still don't see like the average Salvadoran using it in his or her daily life. I think like the main thing is like it's been a bear market, so we must not forget that, right? So like a lot of these, like most Salvadorans did not know about Bitcoin before. They were introduced to it, and they got like the very tail end of like a bull market, and then they like the whole experience with Bitcoin has been like bear market for like a long time.
I was going to say, when I heard that El Salvador was adopting Bitcoin, I figured it wasn't really going to go anywhere until the next halving, the next bear market, because nobody's had a chance to benefit from the whole number go up thing. And I'm really hopeful that that we get another 4-year cycle, that we get the halving in April of next year, and then 6 months or a year from then, Bitcoin's who knows what it's worth, 100,000, 200,000. The sky's the limit, right? And then I think people will it'll start clicking, because most people that I know get into Bitcoin, they get into it because they want to make money off it at first.
Yeah.
They haven't learned about it. Most people aren't coders or cryptographers that are looking at it from a technology perspective. They are interested in it because they know somebody made a lot of money from it, and then they start learning about it. And so I'm very hopeful I'm hopeful of two things. I'm hopeful that the people that got in early in El Salvador are really going to benefit from the next halving cycle, and that other countries are going to see that, and it's going to be a huge vindication for El Salvador. Right now, you've got a lot of pressure from like the IMF, et cetera. They were trying to make countries back away from Bitcoin. But it's if Bitcoin just explodes in value next year and goes up to $100,000 or $200,000 a coin, it's going to be undeniable, and that's the sort of thing people are going to notice. So I'm really optimistic that'll be the case.
I think these bear markets have been for builders, and like at the end of the day, that's good.
That's
I have seen like, because I use Lightning like pretty much, almost more than the average person would, certainly not only in El Salvador, but like in general, more than the average Bitcoiner even. So I've seen how far a lot of these things have come in building them in the bear market. And most people have not even tried it. Like a lot of people, like even on Twitter, I see it all the time. Like, Bitcoin cannot be used for coffee payments because it's too slow or it's too expensive.
I see you chime in all the time and say, we accept it.
We take it, and it's not only that, but it's like, Lightning has come so far during like this whole time, and I've seen like the wallet, like just like on the while using the wallets, like the same wallets have gone, most of them anyways, with notable exceptions, but most of them have gone so far, and like you see so much progress in like the whole thing. Like at the start, at the very start, they had sometimes issues with like payments not routing, with Lightning. And they used to tell you, oh, Lightning is good for like very tiny payments, but if you want to do anything over $100 or whatever, you gotta go one chain because you don't know if you're gonna find the channel or that kind of thing. Like a lot of that has been solved. I think I've done Lightning payments from like one Satoshi to like over $1,500, in Lightning, and
Wow.
they've all worked. Like I haven't had a failed Lightning payment in, I don't even know, like probably over a year at this point, and I've seen just how far and how fast like it's moving to, and a lot of the other random little developments here and there. Like, let me show you here. I have on my wallet one of those Lightning NFC cards. This is made by a company called Tianki, which you paid with Tianki, if you've used their website, or if I sent you ever like a payment link on Twitter DMs, which is like a payment processor that we use, the Salvadoran company. But this allows me, to go like a lot of places, really anywhere. Anyone who has a wallet and an NFC enabled phone, which at the end of the day is most phones nowadays, they need an internet connection, but I don't need one. I just have my sats here preloaded on my card, and just tap to pay, and it works. A lot of people would argue like it's gimmicky at first, but there's like real use cases for this. Like I know people who are living here that have given these to their kids as kind of like pocket spending money for like different things. Like there's like the Bitcoin farmers markets that are going on, sometimes here in the city, but mostly they're at the beach. And people give their kids like these cards. Okay, you have $20 worth of Bitcoin in them, like, and they go to different vendors. Oh, I want this or that, and beep, they just scan it, and it works. And like there's been so much progress going on. I'm actually part of like this video that we did on adopting Bitcoin last year. I don't know if you ever saw that one, but Michael Saylor actually retweeted that video back then, but it was like with the Coin Corner team using the Vault card, which we did like a lightning like a little lightning wheel, if you will. Like different wallets, different methods, NFC cards. Some of them were like Lightning Network URLs, which are those like email looking addresses. And essentially, we did this live, lasted for like a minute and a half. And you had one person sending Lightning, they're all sending like, I think it was $5. And they were all sending it to each other. Okay, I'm going to scan you. I'm going to tap you. Then the next one, I'm going to send it to your Lightning Network URL. And eventually it got to Joe Nakamoto, who was with me at the kiosk during adopting Bitcoin last year. And I believe he used his, like his iWatch, his Apple Watch or something to boop, scan to pay at the end. And I was all paying for like a coffee, using all different wallets, using all different methods, to just showing how the whole ecosystem worked. And it was like, the same sats went between like 8 or 9 people, all live, all within like a minute and a half, between borders, between country, between, it was crazy. Because we were all doing this on Zoom. They were all in the UK happening, except like Joe Nakamoto, who was like during adopting Bitcoin, he was like at the kiosk just to do the final payment for coffee. But it shows you just how interoperative this thing is, and just how better than like the traditional legacy systems are. Because like a lot of people are, I always tell them they're under the impression that because they grab their Visa, because people would argue, oh, how is that different from my debit card, or my credit card? And I'll tell them, you do realize that when it beeps, at the POS system, you grab your Visa and you go to the supermarket or whatever, and it beeps. It's not like the supermarket has the money, when it beeps. Whereas with Lightning, it does, you know, once it beeps, you have the sats, I can do with it whatever I want. Like people think they come here with a Visa or an American Express or whatever, and when it beeps on my machine, oh, it's paid. You know, it's not really paid. It's just like, for the people who don't know this, it's not really paid. I just have, once it beeps, what I get is a reasonable, how do I put this? I get a reasonable expectation that the funds are going to be deposited to my account tomorrow in the next couple of days, right? To my bank account in the next couple of days, and that's why you get to walk away with a coffee. But I don't get to see that money for a while. I'm trusting that Visa, you know, once it beeps, I know the account's been authorized and whatnot, but I cannot use that money to go pay, you know, my paper cup supplier, to whoever, you know, to give you an idea. I cannot use that money right now. I have to wait usually like a day or two to get it. And I'm gonna have to pay, you know, the bank. Here it's about 3.5% plus taxes. Well, so it's close to 4% what we pay for the transaction fee. So, you know, if you're buying like a $2 coffee or whatever it might be, you know, it's 10 cents, whatever, 10 cents of those goes to the bank, right? And I'm not getting that money for like usually between 24 and 48 hours. Luckily here, chargebacks are not a problem. Thankfully, they're not really a thing. But I've heard from a lot of other small businesses in the States that they're like a big deal.
And they charge you like $150 fine for having a chargeback in addition to losing the sale.
So, yeah, which is luckily here it's not a thing. Let's hope it doesn't become one. But
it won't ever become one with Bitcoin. So that's
it won't ever become one with Bitcoin, right? Once it's settled, it's settled. But like that's the whole thing, you know. Imagine doing what we were doing those with the cards and with the Lightning Network URL, where all the wallets were empty and it was like just the original, you know, $5 in Satoshis moving through. How long would that have taken with a card? Which I think is what people don't see it. Oh, sending each, you know, you're gonna have at least a 24-hour wait period between each of them. And we did like 8 or 9 transactions, so you know, a week and a half later, Joe Nakamoto would have been able to buy his coffee, as opposed to like 90 seconds later. And once I get the money, I didn't have to wait. You know, I could go and spend it. I could pay my power bill or my cell phone bill or whatever, you know. Or save it. You know, it's like you mentioned, you do the dollar cost averaging Wednesdays. Like that's what like I do personally with like the whole Bitcoin thing at the store. If you think about it that way, it's like my way of dollar cost averaging. You know, I get Bitcoin sales and I keep those sats. And that's like my way of saving through them. But I also keep like the circular economy going as much as I can. Not everywhere I cannot pay with Bitcoin for everything. And I do realize like a lot of the things that I might pay with Bitcoin, like at least for now, they're probably going to be converted to dollars at one point or another. But I have different suppliers that I'm trying to like grow the whole circular economy as much as I possibly can. Because I know like by spending my sats, I actually, you know, get more sats end up staying in the system that way, and there's more people that eventually are going to see the value of it. Maybe they're not gonna, maybe the first time they get paid with them, they're going to convert them right into dollars. But eventually by spending the sats, I'm actually, you know, helping make more Bitcoiners, if you will.
Exactly. How much of your coffee sales are in Bitcoin? I'm assuming probably the bulk of your online sales, but
the bulk of the online sales, yes. So online, I would say it's 95% in Bitcoin. We can pay with a credit card as well. Here in the store, it's a very different situation. Because I do have, you know, I have like Bitcoiners that come here to the store every day. Most of them do pay with card and not necessarily Bitcoin, so that's something to consider. But online store, yeah, I would say the bulk of it is in Bitcoin. 95% of what we get is in Bitcoin, and all of that has been on Lightning. I think I've done like maybe like 2 on-chain transactions with someone who wanted it. I'm fine with it, you know. Yeah, it's like the bulk of it's been Lightning, and online it's basically like 95%.
I love supporting your business with Bitcoin and supporting El Salvador with Bitcoin. But even, even me, the majority of, I'm hesitant to spend Bitcoin because I know the halving's right around the corner, and it's gonna hopefully radically increase in value. So it's kind of
I
like when you
think in
look
the
back at Pizza
States,
Day.
yeah, but I think if there was no pizza day, if Laszlo had not spent those Bitcoins, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation. Like a lot
Exactly.
of people make fun of this guy for doing that, but they never tell you like he never regretted doing it. Like he had a part to play and he did it. And at that point, that's why we say always like spend and replace.
Right.
Or if you're in the States, you have Strike and similar, or even Cash App, you have ways to pay in Bitcoin that because a lot of the times people I see, they have this concern with like capital gains taxes, and if I'm creating a taxable event by buying coffee in Bitcoin. And I think you use Strike, right?
I used Strike. Yeah.
Yeah, which allows you to like use your fiat to buy Bitcoin for the good beans, if you want to look at it that way, as opposed to spending your own little personal stack. And not creating a taxable event, because at the end of the day you're kind of like, you're not paying them in Bitcoin, you're not spending Bitcoin, you're spending dollars to buy Bitcoin for someone else.
Exactly.
Some
I
might
thought of
argue
it.
semantics, right? But it
I thought of it
avoids
like
the
spin and
whole
replace. Like I was buying Bitcoin and getting rid of it, but and buying Bitcoin and immediately purchasing coffee with it, but without that capital gains nightmare. So yeah, Strike is a great cheat if it's available wherever you are. I think it's available to almost everybody in the United States. As like New York has some
Yeah,
really
New York,
strange
I think you
rules.
can't, but you have Cash App, which like a lot of people have Cash App, and most people don't realize, yeah, you can scan a Lightning QR code with your Cash App, and it will work. As always, like I tell, like the main thing I guess is there are different ways, and it becomes easier and easier all the time. Because what's the alternative? Okay, you can go to the goodbeans.com and you can buy it with your credit card, sure, and you can give all your information and put your and spend 5 minutes filling a Spanish form, because for whatever reason the bank here only takes like I joke, and I even have an FAQ on the website explaining you how to fill like a credit card payment form, because the bank only provides it in Spanish. And at the end of the day, I'm tied to the bank in El Salvador to do this, right? So,
I read that on your
or you
website.
can scan a little QR code.
I'm assuming a lot of browsers will translate that for anybody that would be worried about that, though. Like Chrome, I think will translate to English for you. I haven't tried because I figure what's the point? If I'm buying coffee from you, I want to pay in Bitcoin. And speaking of Salvadoran coffee, I'd heard a lot about it. I'd really wanted to try it for a long time. Before I ordered from you, I'd never had it. My favorite coffee before ordering from you was always Kona Peaberry coffee. It's the place I get it from is it's on the side of a volcano at high altitude. And these are all things that seem to me similar to El Salvador. You've got a similar latitude. You've got volcanic soil. So I assumed that that the coffee in El Salvador would be very similar to the Hawaiian, to the Kona coffee. And in some ways it is, but it's also very distinctly unique. It was amazing. It's now my favorite coffee. I haven't had anything but when at home, I haven't fixed anything but your coffee since I started buying from you. And I drink my coffee black. I usually don't put anything in it. So I really appreciate, a good quality coffee. If it, if you're going to dump a ton of French vanilla creamer in it, it can be almost anything, right? And there's some tremendous health benefits from drinking coffee. It's really high in antioxidants. For people that have diabetes, if they drink it without sugar or creamer, it helps, allegedly, I've been told anyway, helps regulate your blood sugar. And I've noticed that sometimes if I don't have breakfast, but I grab a cup of black coffee in the morning, I can go all day and not feel hungry. So it's really nice to be able to drink a quality coffee. And apparently, unbeknownst to most Americans, El Salvador has a really rich history in coffee, no pun intended. What is the history of the coffee industry in El Salvador?
So El Salvador, I guess like a lot of Latin American countries, for the past, in agriculture anyways, it's kind of like always had like a little cash crop. coffee played its like big part in the history in like the 1900s, like most of the 1900s. So coffee came to El Salvador at the, you know, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when, but sometime in the early 1800s to mid 1800s, coffee found its way to El Salvador because coffee is not from here. So coffee is, you know, it's basically a Middle Eastern crop, you know, and like the northern part of Africa, like that whole area. But it started, you know, going worldwide in the a lot of times in like the 1700s to the 1800s. So coffee here, you know, there might have been some plants before, but really as a big plantation, you know, big coffee farms and everything, it started in the sometime in the mid 1800s to the very early 1900s. That's like the when the history remounts here to El Salvador growing coffee. One of in the 1860s, there's a President Barrios who wanted to grow like the whole coffee industry, and they gave a lot of like tax benefits, like if you were to grow coffee, because back then it was a crop that was very, very valuable. Which is not really like the case. Like I like to joke sometimes that say green coffee. Um, Green coffee is like the only commodity it seems in the world that has not suffered from inflation. Green coffee right now is worth about the same per pound as it was in the 1970s, like in nominal terms. Um, but you know, the dollar is nothing like what it was in the in the 1970s, right? So a lot of things have had to be cut. El Salvador's coffee, I guess it's like heyday was probably like the whole 20th century. Um,
That
it
was going to be
grew
my
so
next
much
question.
that yeah,
I was going to say, has the coffee trade been consistent, or is there a
no.
resurgence or a renaissance?
It's different now. Like, look, I'm here at the coffee shop right now to give you an idea. Like, that's a postcard from a stamp. It's been like blown up. It's like from the 1930s from like El Salvador Airmail that said, you know, El Salvador's coffee is like the best in the world, and it shows like this coffee plant. It's just decoration now. It used to be like a little post stamp. But El Salvador's coffee was like the biggest part of the economy between like the 1920s and like the 1960s. That's like to give you an idea. We used to be like in the very early 70s, that's when it peaked. And El Salvador used to be like the fourth largest coffee producer in the world. El Salvador's tiny, to give you an idea. I mean, El Salvador is about the size of Massachusetts. So it's a very small country. I mean, you're from Florida, basically, you can probably find like count a couple counties in Florida that are larger than El Salvador in total, right? So
Exactly.
this tiny little country used to produce like so much coffee back when it was like worth a lot of money, like in the 70s. And like I've heard the story from like my dad. Like he said, like if you had a cup, you know, you had a few acres of coffee, you could support a family with that, you know. And you know, each time, you know, a few bags, like you have the coffee sacks here that are like 100 pounds. Right now they're plastic, you know. Back then it used to be like hemp essentially. But they're like 100 pounds of coffee. If you had a few of those, you know, three or four of those, you could buy a car.
Wow. Yeah.
Three or four of those won't even buy you an iPhone nowadays, you know, to give you an idea, let alone a car. Um, so the value of the actual crop went lower and lower and lower with time. So like, and then we had the Civil War and everything, right? So the whole industry in El Salvador for coffee, it ended up going significantly down during these years. It used to be at one point represent over half of the GDP of the country. Right now, it's about 5%. Um, and it's mostly nowadays it's different, you know. So it went really down during the whole 80s and 90s because of low prices and the war, low international commodity prices and the war and everything. Right now, it's been mostly focused on quality as opposed to quantity. We realize we're never going to be the fourth largest coffee producer in the world anymore. We can still
I
make
wouldn't
one of
hold
the
your breath. It
best
could happen.
coffees, but we can still make some of the best coffees in the world. Like right now, it's been focused so much more on quality over quantity, whereas before, like the whole specialty coffee thing, it started like it was always good coffee, you know, but there was really not a difference between like people in the 80s were not looking for different varieties. People in the 70s, 60s, they were not looking, oh, okay, this is bourbon coffee, this is geisha coffee. Simply not a thing. It was like all divided by like geographic area. And right now, like, but El Salvador was one, you know, it was like a market. Okay, this is Salvadoran coffee. It's worth so much percentage over like any regular coffee in the world, to give you an idea. Um, but right now, it's like goes down to like each individual farm, which it didn't back then. Like for us, for instance, is Via España. That's the farm we work with, and it's a farm that's been in business since 1867.
Wow.
To give you an idea, it's run right now by Alfredo Mena, who's like the sixth generation owner of the farm. I met him because we went to elementary school together, to give you an idea. But it's been six generations of like coffee growing, coffee farming, coffee processing, and exporting. So they've learned a thing or two over the past 150 years, right? Ever since his like great great grandfather Aris Mena came over from Spain, because a lot of times that's how a lot of these like farms and the whole story started. Right now it's mostly focused on quality over quantity. There's been changes in, you know, like in every country there's been changes in laws, changes in like different incentives and types of things to grow. um so I don't see us becoming, you know, like I told you, like a very massive exporter in terms of quantity, nor would I care to be, because I'd rather us like keep doing what we're doing now, growing it obviously, but focusing on quality over quantity. Because there's enough cheap coffee coming from like Brazil and Vietnam, which are like the main markets. They're all like sun grown. Here, all the coffee shade grown. To give you an idea on how it works is like here, all of our coffees, for instance, most of the export coffee in El Salvador, they're called corte gourmet, which means gourmet cuttings. So if you have the coffee plant here, they don't all mature at the same rate. They don't all ripen at the same rate. So you have to send someone, you know, by hand, picking all the beans once they're ripe. Um, if you are, for example, in Brazil, just looking at whatever goes on, you know, on your Folgers or your Maxwell House, there's machines that just shake the tree, and everything drops. And then you just collect it, you know. And if there's, you know, there's unripe berries there, so be it. There is pieces of branches, leaves, whatever falls down from the tree is collected, it's ground up, it's roasted, it's ground up, it's brewed, turned into instant coffee, right? Um, if you want to guarantee quality, I mean, just look at the beans. You know, you grab a bag from wherever origin you want, you open it, just look at the beans, but actually look at them. And that's why I tell people buy whole bean, because you cannot hide anything from whole bean. If the beans have little holes in them, that might be insect damage, you know. If they're all brittle and they have broken, generally speaking, it's because they were green when they were roasted. So if they're not like whole, nice, beautiful, you can tell a lot just by looking at them. And whenever you're buying ground coffee at the supermarket, that's all hidden. You have no idea what went into that bag, right? So
Your beans are beautiful. I posted a picture on Twitter that I was measuring it out of my grinder, and I was like, I snapped a photo. It was like art. I'd blow that up to a poster and put it on my wall. The you know, depending on the roast, some of them have a little bit of the oily sheen. The ones I was
yeah, yeah.
grinding up that morning had like a nice tanned leathery finish to them. They're gorgeous.
Yeah,
You can
I remember
definitely.
you compared them to a Cuban cigar, right?
That's it. So if people are cigar aficionados, it's weird because you can grow tobacco. I mean, they grow tobacco in the United States. You can grow it almost anywhere.
Mhm.
Cuba is like the only place in the world where they grow the binder, the filler, and the wrapper all in one location, and you can tell the difference. I mean, you think you couldn't, and maybe someone who has never smoked a cigar before might not notice the difference, but uh, The Cuban cigar just looks different. The wrapper, you know, it depends on the season as well, but it's just got a nice leathery earthiness to it. Yeah, the beans reminded me of that. That was really cool. So they're
A lot of what
beautiful.
you taste is like the coffee processing and not only the bean, but how it's treated afterwards. Because, you know, like we could go on and a long time, and I can explain to you how it goes. But ever since the beans are picked, that's not where the process ends. There's a lot of other steps that happen between you getting them, and you know, it's all like that's the main thing. It's all like naturally done. We don't it's all artisanally done, and it's using processes the farmers and the growers here have learned over the last 150 years how to get the best quality out of them. It's not an industrial process where, you know, the plants are not shaken and everything that falls out just gets roasted and ground up. Because that's sadly a lot of the most of the coffee market in the world is that way. You know, when you get in the Keurig capsules, it's not premium coffee because it doesn't need to be. And it's all gone so far downhill in order to make it as cheap as possible in the world that I think it's about time to focus again on quality and on giving you a good product that's like you mentioned, it can even be good for your health. At the very least, it's not going to be detrimental to your health, and it's going to be delicious and a great start to your morning. And it's going to be a testament to all the people who worked during the whole process ever since the coffee was planted to, you know, you in the morning grinding it up, making it for yourself. Moving back to you know, bringing the art to coffee again, and making sure, you know, you get the best taste in coffee and the best experience in the morning, as opposed to something that is so mass produced, just with the whole mentality of let's make it as cheap as we can and as profitable as we can, which is sadly not only coffee but most things in the world today are like that, right?
Yeah, I think you've got a great fit with Bitcoiners. That's one of the kind of the magical things is most
The
Bitcoiners that I
proof of
know,
work in coffee.
proof of work in coffee, you know, and they appreciate the artisanal aspects and the quality, you know, especially if you're going to spend your Bitcoin, you want to get the best product possible for your Satoshis. So I think that's just a fantastic fit. I'm assuming that's just going to go. I mean, I'm assuming you're doing very well, and you're going to just continue to keep doing better and better. I have recommended to everybody I know to try your coffee. A friend of mine, he only drinks coffee from a specific farm in like Kenya, and I'm going to buy him a bag and ship it to him because I don't think he's ever gotten around to ordering from you. And he's not a Bitcoiner. I can't convince him. I've been trying to orange pill him for years, but it only took me about a week. I think last time I ordered from you, I was going to be out of town, so I waited because the coffee gets here so fast. I don't know if it's just easier to get shipped to Florida because it, you know, just comes.
Florida's probably the fastest one, but you know, even if you're in anywhere else, like anywhere in the States, it usually takes 10 to 12 days.
When I order coffee
Florida's
from
a little
Hawaii,
faster.
it takes longer. I mean, it literally, if I order, even if I order like, even if you were to order through like Amazon, where they guarantee you like the next day, that doesn't apply to like Hawaii. It just takes longer, and you know, it takes like 10 days to get Kona coffee shipped to Florida. Of course, we're the opposite side of the country.
It's crazy because like a lot of people wouldn't realize it, but we are significantly closer to the States than Hawaii is, right? I mean, a flight between San Salvador and Miami is about 2.5 hour flight. You know, it's not different from going from Miami to like Houston or something.
That's what I was thinking. It's like I flew to Phoenix the other day, and I think I flew further. I definitely flew further. It's 4 hours. So that's really cool. So when Americans think of coffee, they normally think geographically. They think, well, this is Colombian coffee, or this is Kona coffee, or this is, you know, Kenyan coffee, or whatever. El Salvador, as you mentioned, is a small country, but are there still geographically different regions, or is pretty much all the coffee just high altitude shade grown?
Look, pretty much all the coffee is high altitude shade grown, everything that gets exported anyways. Obviously, they are, even in the best farms, not all the coffee is going to be the best quality. You know, it's a natural product, so at the end of the day, it's always like a bell curve, right? With anything really, you're gonna get just as much amazing coffee as you're gonna get relatively poor coffee from a farm, but that's where the whole processing and the sorting comes in. Not all the coffees from Via España get to be in this little bag, you know. We reserve like, and we only ship like basically
the best that we can offer. But there are coffees for everything. You know, some of the coffees in from this particular farm do end up in cheaper blends at the supermarket here in El Salvador. You know, that are like $4 or $5 a pound, blended with like a lot of other stuff. But that's like with every natural product, really. But what we can tell you is like we select and we sort like the best that the farms have to offer. And I like people to think of coffee like they think of wine. You know, if you went into if you went to the supermarket, to the liquor store, or whatever, and you want to get a bottle of champagne, and it just said, wine, France, that's it. A bottle that just says wine of France. You might want a little bit more information than that. You might, okay, what grape is it? Maybe where in France it was grown. Or if you just went, and I guess the same with like a lot of things, but you buy a bottle of wine from California, you want to know maybe, oh, was this from Napa Valley? Is this a Chardonnay? If it just says white wine grown in the United States, you would go like, I kind of want a little bit more information than that. So it's like the same with coffee. Even Colombian coffee, you have so much variety. And Colombia is such a massive country compared to El Salvador. But with each farm, you have different techniques. With each coffee, you have different processing methods, different varieties. And they all play a part in how like the end product tastes. At the end of the day, you can do a blindfold tasting and you can tell, oh, is it white wine or is it red wine? And sure. But you can tell so much more than that, just by how you make it and how like the whole coffee is. So I'd like people to think of it as that way as they think of wine. There's like, there's the very basics, but you can learn so much more and it can go so much deeper. Just like wine or with like any like natural product in that way, even the season, how much sun it had that year, everything is going to play a part. Everything is pretty much going to play a part.
I've ordered your bold roast, your dark roast, the Torgos, and the Via España Saturninas. How do you pronounce that?
Saturninos.
Saturninas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether my favorite has been the Saturninas or the Torgos. What is the difference in those varieties?
So the Torogos is the same. We just rebranded it, right? It was the same as the Saturninos.
That's why I can't tell the difference.
So we just rebranded that one. Having said that, with the bold, the difference is it's the same exact bean. It's just a roast. Some people like a darker roast. What's a darker roast going to give you? A more chocolatey taste. It's going to be less acidic, more bitter. A lot of people do like those bitter notes. And it's a darker roast without going into the super ridiculously dark Starbucks type coffee, that it's like just obscenely dark. Because at the end of the day, it's like making caramel, you start with sugar and water and you heat it up and it gets sweeter and richer and nicer until it burns. And once it burns, whatever you do, you cannot bring it back. So with the roast is basically with the Torogos and the Mapache, it's just the roast level that changes for some people who like a darker roast versus a more medium roast. With all the other ones that we do have different varieties. Right now, they're all from the same farm. We have, for instance, right now we have a Pacamara and we also have a Geisha, which will give you totally different experiences in flavor from like the other ones. Like, for example, the Geisha is very much like a lot more floral sweet coffee. It tastes very different than any of our main varieties would. And those are like our limited editions. We change those all the time. For the Saturnino, for the Torogos and the Mapache, we try to keep those all year. And for the most part, we have it in stock all the time. We roast all the time as well. We're roasting usually every weekend or two tops. So, you're always getting a pretty fresh coffee. Compare that to a supermarket coffee, which was probably roasted 6 to 9 months before you actually pick it off the shelf. To like give you an idea, hours you could have it on your door, you know, anywhere from like a week and a half to 3 weeks after it's been roasted, which is perfectly fresh and fine for really 99% of anything that you're gonna want to do with the coffee. So, you know, that's like the main thing. It changes like the roast level between the Torgos and the Mapache, but it's the same exact bean. And with the limited editions, we have like a description of all the flavor profiles and everything you can find on each one of them. But those are going to be like the more different out there coffees, because in the coffee world, you know, the weirder your coffee is, like there's, you know, there's good weird and bad weird obviously, but the good weirder your coffee is, the more points it gets, and the more points it gets, basically the more valuable it is per pound. Because it's very easy to make, you know, generic tasting coffee that tastes like you know, like it came out of a Keurig, or, you know, just very generic tasting coffee. But the more you work at it, the more you can get the subtle flavors, and the more you take care of the plant and the different varieties and everything. Same with grapes. You know, you can get that generic white wine or red wine taste fairly easily. But the more, you know, the nicer the grape, and the better the processing, and the better the roasting, everything, you can get a lot of subtle flavors and a lot of different experiences in coffee. Just the same as you would with wine.
I was going to ask you about that. All the descriptions are on the website, and your website is it's thegoodbeans.sv.
No, the goodbeans.com.
.com. Okay.
Goodbeans.sv, that's like our Instagram.
All right.
But yeah, right now it's the goodbeans.com.
The first time I ordered on your website, I don't think it was launched to the public yet. It was.
Yeah, it was. So we had like a little website that just told you to contact me on Twitter or to fill a form. That's how it started, the whole shipping thing. Right now it's like a whole Shopify integrated. You can do it yourself at whatever time, you know, and you can pay with card, or you can pay with Bitcoin, and it does it all for you. It calculates the shipping wherever you are in the world. I recommend most people grab our like 4 packs, because that's like or order 4 separate pounds, because that's gonna give you the better shipping deal. In 4-pound increments. That's how you're gonna get the best, you know, the best deal with shipping, because at the end of the day, the cost of shipping tends to be more than, depending on the destination, more than even the actual coffee.
It was about half and half. I usually order 2 pounds at a time, and it was about the same for the shipping as it was for the coffee.
But if you go with like
a little bit since I first ordered.
If you go with like the 4 pounds, that's what gives you the best deal. Right now we have like, for instance, the Mapache, we have the 4-pound pack shipped to the States or Canada for $75, which comes to about 18, I think it's 18.74 a pound.
That's amazing.
Already including shipping, already with everything. So I think that's probably the lowest we've had already, with the shipping and everything included. But yeah, we try to keep, you know, the costs down as much as possible.
Oh, it's a fantastic deal, especially for the quality. I mean, I've seen Kona coffee out there for $80 a pound, just $80 a pound, and you can get 4 pounds of coffee shipped to the United States for like $75 on your website right now. So that's insane. And plebs, order that coffee as fast as you can, because I guarantee it's going to get more expensive as it gets more popular. I mean, you're a small country, you can only produce so much, and it's on par. It's on par with coffee I've paid a heck of a lot more for. So that's awesome. But for those people who have never had El Salvadoran coffee, I know that the variety and the roast makes all the difference in the world, but is there one characteristic that stands out that like that? For example, I was talking about Cuban cigars. Cuban cigars usually there's just an earthy, is the only way I can describe it, flavor to them. They like, you know, that's a Cuban cigar. It's right off the bat, boom, this is Cuban tobacco. Is there a signature flavor to Salvadoran coffee, or is it just coffee so bold that it all has to do with the roast?
Look, if you go to like a medium roast, I think like the main characteristics of a Salvadoran coffee would be in general, and this is very general terms. You have a malic acidity. So in acidity, you have different levels of acidity and different types. We call it a malic acid type acidity, which is basically characteristic of the volcanic soils and the high-grown, shade-grown coffee. What's a malic acid? Think apples. You get that, and you have this malic acidity balanced with like a very rich sweetness. So think brown sugar apples. It sounds like I sometimes like to tell apple pie qualities to that coffee, which is kind of weird. As opposed to some other destinations, we're gonna have a very marked citric type acidity. So think limes, more tart coffees, more bitter coffees. El Salvador coffees tend to have a mild malic type apple type acidity, and they tend to have like sweet chocolatey tastes. Having said that, that's like a very general description for everything, and it's gonna vary with each roast and vary with each farm. But in general, that's what it shares with Hawaii. Hawaii, I think, like the main difference is that you also get the salt water from the ocean blowing, which creates a different kind of microclimate. But in general, those volcanic soils, yeah, those volcanic soils, they tend to give that, and the processing of the coffee. Most coffees in El Salvador, they're natural processed or semi-washed as opposed to full wash coffees, which we could get into the whole differences on that, but that also lends to a certain fruitiness, a certain sweetness. They have good body. They're not very tea-like. Like even the Gesha, which is a variety that's very well known for being very light-bodied and very tea-like. Even in El Salvador, they're more heavy-bodied than that, and it's because of the volcanic soil and because of the microclimate and everything. So in general, you expect a cup that has good body. It has dark chocolate flavors and it has nice sweetness and a little bit of acid, but not something that's like, wow, super sour or super, because there's a lot of coffees that are very sour like that. So those are, different notes that you can expect in most Salvadoran coffees. But that's kind of like saying, in general, how are wines in France? It's, yeah, you can have a good idea, but each individual coffee, even from one farm to the next, can vary so much depending on how it's treated.
Year to year. There's a
year to year.
Chianti that I like to drink when I'm having a red wine, and like the 2017 was spectacular, and I couldn't drink the 2018. 2019 was okay. So just the same grape, same vineyard, even year to year makes a difference. Like you said, the amount of sunlight, the amount of rain.
And speaking of the weather, I don't know how the next harvest is gonna be. And it's kind of like, I guess, a little bit scary in that sense, because we've had a very weird weather season this year. We have El Nino right now, which for Central America, whenever there's El Nino going on, it means drought. So the first half of the rainy season, it didn't rain very much at all. Right now, it's kind of normalizing a little bit, thankfully. Start getting more rains right now, but essentially coffee, it makes coffee once a year. You plant the coffee tree and you wait 4 years for the first harvest, and then you get one annual harvest. But you have when this year was at the flowering stage, it was very, very dry compared to like a normal year. So I think the yields are going to be lower, and again, we'll see how it goes with this particular harvest. At the very least, I don't think it's going to be a great harvest just in terms of yield because of the amount of water that we had. But the same thing with wine, sometimes when the plants are struggling, they make the better coffee. So in terms of yield, it might not be that great. In terms of quality, it might be even better. We'll have to see how it plays out once harvesting comes. Her harvest season is the very end of the year, so between December and February, that's kind of when their coffee is being harvested, depending on the altitude. Lower altitudes mature faster, so if it's a low altitude coffee, you might see it being harvested in November.
Soon.
It's very soon. But the higher altitudes, they're usually around January.
I mean, it's a bummer.
We'll know soon.
Yeah, it's a bummer that there might not be enough to go around, but I'm excited to see how it affects the flavor. I grow chili peppers, and I know that if you give them less water than they want, it really
They're more
brings out the
intense.
flavor and the spice. Yeah. Uh, so yeah, I'm looking forward to some of the best coffee. I mean, I love your coffee. If you were a customer just walking off the street into your shop, what would you order? What's your favorite coffee? How do you prepare it for yourself?
Yeah, usually I'm like an espresso type person because that allows me to taste, the coffee at its strongest, if you will. And espresso, it can tell you a lot about the coffee, but it also tells you like a lot about the actual coffee shop and what they're, with the good ones anyways, what the style, because you can pull up different flavors from even the same exact beans depending on how you make them. But I'm personally more like an espresso type person, because I don't necessarily like to drink like a ton of coffee. Um, but I'm usually like either like an Americano or espresso. I'm not a big milk coffee drinker. Maybe a cappuccino once in a while, but I don't know, milk. I mean, I'm not a big milk person in general. So generally that's what I would order. But most people, I would say the cappuccino is probably like the drink I sell the most in the store easily. Most people do like sweet coffee drinks, and that's fine. But if you want to really taste the coffee, either one of the filter coffee methods we would recommend, or you know, or just go to like an espresso or an americano, without any sugar, without any milk, because that way you can taste the actual, coffee. If you're ordering a latte, at the end of the day, the actual coffee that goes in it, it's not gonna be, that if you're ordering a pumpkin spice latte, it's not gonna make that much of a difference on how it tastes at the end of the day. Um, but with the other, more concentrated coffee drinks, you can totally tell, the quality of the coffee just by trying it.
What do you need to tell us about your business that I haven't asked you about, that we haven't spoken about yet?
I guess if any of your viewers are coming for like adopting Bitcoin this year, we're not far. We're close to, or whenever anyone visits El Salvador, we're close to the Sheraton Hotel. We're close to the Barcelona Hotel. We're close to like a lot of places. You can come here for breakfast, enjoy a cup of coffee, enjoy a conversation. You can order online if you'd like to try it. But I always love when people visit in the store and we have a nice chat. So do visit El Salvador. It's safe, and there's a lot of things to do, especially if you're like a Bitcoiner. Don't expect to be able to pay with Bitcoin absolutely everywhere, but you can at GoodBeans, and you can like a lot of places, and you can have a really good time. There's the Adopting Bitcoin conference, and right now going on in November. There's also Miss Universe going on. If anyone watches Miss Universe, is going to be in El Salvador again. The last time it was here was in 1975. So yeah. So it's been a while. Bob Barker hosted that one, believe it or not.
Yeah, the price is wrong. So how do people? You ship anywhere in the world, basically, right?
I mean, most places, but
probably
like
not North Korea, but
yeah. What I tell people is, if you trust your local, because at the end of the day, who is gonna end up delivering is not the El Salvador mail, it's your local post office, right? So as long as your local post office is competent, then yeah, I'll ship to you. Because there's some places that I have had bad experiences shipping. Sadly, Australia and New Zealand are places that I used to ship to, and I don't anymore because customs in Australia and New Zealand are a pain. Like if you order in the States, you're just gonna get your pound of coffee, and that's not gonna be a big deal. Or Canada, but Australia and New Zealand, I've seen customs destroy packages, and like I have photos. It's insane. Like someone grabbed with a
box
big
cutter.
knife, and they
Yeah.
cut it like a box cutter. They cut it this way, and then they like stapled it here and stapled it that way, and then they sent it to the guy. And I'm like, that's like, yeah. So Australia, New Zealand, don't advise you to order from there, but pretty much if you have anywhere in Europe or most places in Asia or States or Canada, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
So,
I can
but
say
I'll ship anywhere really.
I've never had anything opened that you've sent me. It's just arrived in the mail.
Yeah, in the States, I don't think anyone has ever had a problem with customs. It's just arrived in the mail. And 95% of the packages I send are either to the States or Canada. Canada takes a little bit longer, but in general, in the States or Canada, they've been fine. Not a single parcel has gone lost yet, so that's good. But yeah, you
When I was looking for a
New
place
Zealand are the ones that I tell people, like, I get people ordering, and I tell them, I don't know if it's gonna even make it there. So it's if you want to risk it, sure, I'll ship it. But other than that, it's been fine to literally every other destination I've ever sent coffee to.
I can definitely vouch for the United States, at least Florida. On Twitter, your Good Beans at Good Beans right? The the's at the end.
Yeah.
Why? That's
no reason. Whenever we started, Twitter gave us that address.
Oh, okay.
So
I was just curious.
Like went with it. Yeah, no, it wasn't intentional. It's just some Twitter gave us that address. So and I tried changing it a few times, and the problem is whenever someone has tagged you, like, I just live with it, because like you can change it, but any person that has tagged you before, the link gets broken and everything. So
I was just wondering if there was an inside story there, like, if you
no.
were if you were in the encyclopedia, it'd be like Good Beans, the
no, not really.
Yeah.
It just happened that way. I tried to add Good Beans, and already someone had it. But yeah, no, there's not really a story behind it, other than we haven't changed it, because otherwise, like, everyone who has ever tagged us, that link would get broken. So at this point, we just kind of live with it.
And to order your coffee, it's thegoodbeans.com.
Yes,
your website. Order right
thegoodbeans.com.
online. You can pay with Bitcoin, credit card. I recommend paying with Strike if you're in the United States, like we mentioned, so you don't have to deal with capital gains shenanigans. Are those the best ways to follow you, to keep track of you, or how?
Yeah, the other those are the English ones, anyways. At the end of the day, we're a coffee shop in El Salvador, so like, pretty much all the other social media is in Spanish.
Well, almost half of my listeners are from Latin America. So
yeah, if you want to follow us on like Instagram is goodbeans.sv. And on Instagram, that's basically, like, that's our main local social media. So that one's not really focused on shipping or anything else. It's just like, nice photos of coffee and like local promotions if you want to come to the store. But those are the main three. The English ones are the website and the Twitter, goodbeans or the goodbeans.com, and the goodbeans.sv on Instagram.
Are you coming to the United States for any trade shows, anything like that, anytime soon that you know of?
I don't have any plans. I'm gonna attend Adopting Bitcoin here, so I'll be there. I'm the permissionless coffee guy, because I always ask for. Last 2 years, I've tried to get a booth and they never answered. So I was like, whatever. I'll just deal from I'll just deal from my car. But I actually have planned to have my permissionless coffee T-shirt. So I'll be wearing it at Adopting Bitcoin. So if anyone's attending the conference, you should, if you have a chance, come.
I want to. I have a few commitments here that make it very hard to get away. I have a lot of things going on. Before COVID, I was running a small business that got shut down, and we're trying to get started again. I have a very old dog. He's 13 years old, which is really old for a German Shepherd. So it's kind of hard to get someone to watch a dog. So when I get away, it's few and far between, but El Salvador is 100% on my checklist. And I'm going to have to book more time, because I want to see your coffee shop. I want to go out to El Zonte, just because I guess that's Bitcoin Beach. And I want to see. I'd love to do one of the. I mean, there's got to be a farm tour, like a coffee trail where you can go to some of these, or at least to see the Villa España estate. I don't know if they do tours, or if that's something your shop can organize.
Yeah, we can. I mean, we can do that. That's cool. We also have, like, since you were interested in like tours on nature and all those things. On YouTube, you can find there's this documentary that just came out this year called, I think it's called El Salvador Untamed. But if you put like El Salvador Nigel Marvin, that documentary guy, the poor man's Richard Attenborough. But yeah, David Attenborough. Yeah, so there's this documentary, and they show you around all these places and like nature in El Salvador. So check it out. El Salvador Untamed by Nigel Marvin. It's on YouTube. And you can have
It's
different ideas. And I always tell people just to put El Salvador travel on YouTube, and you'll see so much like now people vlogging all the time, and they show you what they've done. So you can have
there's this
an
couple that was
idea of
touring
what to do here.
El Salvador that I was following, and there's a lot of that. But it's just not the same as seeing it in person. So,
Oh no,
and look,
yeah,
you
you have
mentioned
to
it's
go.
an easy flight. The problem is you got to either fly out of all the flights I've looked at are either out of Houston or Miami, and I'm out of Central Florida. Like, so Orlando would be the closest airport to me.
Orlando, you can fly from Orlando. You can also fly from Fort Lauderdale. I guess with Florida, the cheapest is either Spirit or Frontier.
Yeah,
But most people look for like American Airlines would fly out of Miami. United would be Houston.
they
But
had weird layovers for me. Like, you'd end up
yeah.
almost spending the night in Miami.
Try
Most of the connections I was
Avianca.
looking at.
Avianca has like the Colombian airline, but it's like the main one that serves El Salvador because they bought up the El Salvador local airline about 15 years ago. But Avianca has I don't know, just from Florida, maybe like a dozen flights a day. So do check it out. But you can get it from
Super easy from
Orlando with
Miami.
Avianca.
Probably
Yeah,
just
from
easier to drive to
Miami, there's like
Miami. And then
from Fort
Miami, it's like 2
Lauderdale.
hours.
I'd do anything. I'd do anything to avoid Miami airport. So Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale, and it's only an hour. I'm about an hour and 45 minutes from Fort Lauderdale. It's supposed to like 2.5 from Miami. When you fly into San Salvador, how far are you from the airport that you mentioned? You're right down the street from the Sheraton.
Yeah. So the airport is about 45 minutes from the city here, so it's not super close, but we're right by most of where all the hotels are. But the airport is it's about 45 minutes from us.
Do most people book a hotel shuttle or an Uber or just a regular taxi? How do you get from the airport?
Look, I think most people do an Uber or like a taxi. My advice: rent a car, because like the main thing is like if you're only staying in San Salvador, it's fine to it's really like not a big deal to like get Ubers to and from places. But if you want to visit like the whole country, get a car because you can get an Uber from San Salvador to anywhere. It's very hard a lot of times to get one back. And people tend to find out about that the hard way. So renting a car is probably my best advice. Other than that, if you're planning only to stay in San Salvador and the Libertad, maybe up to El Sonte, but yeah, Uber is fine. But if you want to visit like the Mayan ruins and you want to visit, different areas in El Salvador, because at the end of the day, you can drive end to end in about 6 hours. So again, small country, but you can do a lot with like renting a car. So that's my advice to anyone that comes in. If you drive, rent a car. If not, you can get around with Uber, but it's going to be hard sometimes getting back from places, or you're going to be limited on how much where you can go.
Well, I let time get away from us. I've gone about a half an hour longer than I promised I'd keep you. So I apologize for that. But before we end this podcast, what do you want? What do you want my listeners to know that I haven't asked you?
I don't know if necessarily I think we've covered a lot of things, but I want them to visit. Not visit the GoodBeans, but visit El Salvador. Find out how it is now, and I want this country to grow. I want this country to grow. I want the best for my country, obviously. So I want people to get to talk about it. I'm very happy when we have visitors. I'm very happy when people just tweet or they talk about it in general. Like even a lot of people have been moving here from like a lot of different places. You don't necessarily have to move to El Salvador, but if you can visit, consider it for your next vacation. Considering visiting us if you're in El Salvador, and telling people support El Salvador by buying Salvadoran products, whatever they might be. Go try. If you're in the United States, there's a lot of Salvadorans in the States. You can maybe try to find there's a pupuseria, which is like a local Salvadoran food near where you live, and try it out. That's like the main thing. I just want to help this country grow and put my little grain of sand. And if I can inspire someone to like visit El Salvador, to even try a pupusa, which is like the national dish.
We don't have a pupuseria anywhere near here. I guess maybe probably one in Orlando. It's about an hour and a half drive.
Where in Florida are you in?
I'm exactly the middle of Florida, north to south on the East Coast. So Cocoa Beach and Cape Canaveral are,
Okay.
if you're looking at a map of Florida, coming down the Atlantic coast, there's a little tiny triangle kind of in the middle that sticks out into the ocean. That's Cape Canaveral, and we're right there. So, and we're about an hour. Florida takes about 2 hours to drive across if you could go straight. So from me, it's about an hour to Orlando. That's dead center in the middle, and then another hour to Tampa.
Well, there's a great thing about pupusas. They freeze quite well, and you can pop them up on the toaster like they're Pop-Tarts. So if you find yourself in Orlando, you can buy a bunch and just stick them in your freezer. And
that's good intel. I found a pupusa truck in Albuquerque, New Mexico, of all places. It was at was it one of the brewing companies? It wasn't Bosque. I think it was at Marble Brewing Company. They had a pupusa truck out front. Oh, jackpot! Craft beer and pupusas. But I was on a diet, so I had to behave. Well,
I tried like a $15 pupusa at Disney once.
Oh geez. Yeah.
Epcot pupusas might not be it, but
I didn't know you could get pupusas at Epcot, and they've got the pyramid, the Mexican pyramid, but I didn't know there was
you can get them sometimes. I think it's like it's like a seasonal
wine fest thing.
Sure.
Well, and you probably have to pass a good Salvadoran restaurant to get to Epcot anyway. Well, thank you very much for doing this. I've actually been wanting to ask you to do an interview for a long time, but we don't do a lot of interviews. Normally, I just do my monologue style show, and so I wanted to have my game. I wanted to improve my game a little bit before I asked you to do so. And then you reached out on Twitter asking for podcasts that.
Yeah, because I've been doing this on Nostr, but it never gets recorded. So
yeah, so this will be recorded. It'll be in audio form on all the audio podcast platforms, and it'll be on video on Spotify. And I've got a YouTube channel that I haven't really used because I don't do a lot of video, but I can put it on YouTube probably as well. It's going to be a pretty big file, so I don't know what the best way, if I wanted to get you a copy, would be if you have anywhere you wanted to post it, or you can just link to it.
I'll just link to it whenever you upload it on Spotify or wherever the podcast platform. Because I think it's gonna be a big video.
Yeah, we're an hour and a half in. So, well, thank you very much for your time. I cannot wait to come visit your shop. I want to see. You're definitely on my. I mean, if people put their list of all the things they want to visit when they're in Salvador, and believe it or not, you're number one on that list because. I've seen Mayan pyramids. I haven't seen your Mayan pyramids, but I've seen Mayan pyramids. I live on the beach, so El Zonte will be different, but it's the beach. But I'm really excited about checking out your coffee. So hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it, and we'll hope we have to do this again sometime because I'm sure as soon as I hit stop, I'll remember something I forgot to ask you. All right, thank you for your time. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.